Hey friends, welcome back to another video. I'm here to talk about my September wrap up, all of the books that I read last month. So I had my baby. Finneas Thompson was born on September 28th, and we're all happy and healthy and settling in. Today is actually, as I'm filming this, his 2-week birthday, 2 weeks since birth, and we're doing all right. It's a wild ride, let me tell you. It's insane, but he's currently sleeping, hence why I'm able to film this video. I'll insert a clip in the end of him maybe sleeping, maybe awake, I don't know. I'll insert something in the end, but let me get into the books. I didn't get to read that many. I mean, I read plenty, but less than my usual monthly reads. I'm gonna start with some historical fiction. So the last video I posted before baby arrived was my trying a chapter of a bunch of popular historical fiction books, and the book that made it towards the top of the list is The Giver of Stars by Jojo Moyes, so I went ahead and finished this. I actually finished this book as my first contractions were starting, and so I will always remember this as like the second to last book that I read before baby arrived. But this beloved historical fiction, I get why it's beloved. It's really well done. This is often compared to Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek, and those two both have to do with the Pack Horse Library Project in the Appalachian Mountains. I've since read both. I like this one a little bit better, but they're both good on their own. I gave this one 4 stars. It wasn't a perfect read for me, but it was still really good, and it follows a group of women that become friends. The main character is someone from England that married a man in Kentucky in hopes of starting a life and finding this new adventure, and then it ends up not being all it's cracked up to be, and she ends up being very lonely and having a really hard marriage, and so she befriends this group of women. They become librarians, and this is a book mainly focused on friendship and a little bit of romance and community. There's very despicable male characters in here that you absolutely hate, but I am glad that I finally read this one. It took me way too long. This is such a hype book, and so I'm glad to check it off the list. Next up, get ready for an unpopular opinion. A book that I really did not like was Cutting for Stone by Abraham Verghese. This book is mainly set in Ethiopia, and it follows 2 twin brothers and how they were born, their upbringing, their family, their adolescence and childhood, and coming of age, and ultimately some events that occurred when they were adults. This was a really hard read. I think maybe timing wise didn't work for me, but also, I don't know, a lot of stuff bothered me about this book. Some coming of age stories work and some didn't. I read this on the back half of Demon Copperhead, which is another coming of age story that worked pretty well for me. I enjoyed my time with that one because I cared about the character, and I had a hard time with this one because I did not care about these main characters. They were not likable to me. Like, Demon was likable, even though he was flawed and there was a ton of terrible things that were happening to him. I was still rooting for him. I cared for him. I did not care about these teenage boys. There's a lot of like that coming of age sexual puberty stuff in here that also I don't love to read about, which is why I tend to not love coming of age stories for those reasons. There is also some very brutal, very descriptive medical content in here. If you are into that, probably would love, because it's so descriptive, because the author, I believe, is a surgeon, so he knows what he's writing about. But it was really hard to read, especially being like 38, 39 weeks pregnant when I read this. There is a very brutal birth scene in here, birth and death scene. It's not a spoiler because it happens in the beginning. The mom of these twin boys hemorrhages and dies, and it's just this bloody, terrible birth scene, and I was like, oh my god, what am I reading? Like, I'm about to give birth. I don't want to be reading this. So all that to say, I landed on like 2.5 stars. This wasn't a terrible book. It was well written. I get why people love it. This just was not my kind of read for various reasons. Next, I picked up Blackmore by Julianne Donaldson. This is definitely more of a young adult historical romance. I didn't realize it was young adult when people have talked about this book, and it's also shelved in the adult section of the library, but this definitely was more of a YA feel. Like, I think this would have been an amazing read when I was like 16 years old, but it wasn't terrible. I landed on 3 stars. This is a proper romance, whatever that means. I don't really even know what that means, but basically not steamy or explicit romance, set on the Yorkshire moors in this creepy gothic kind of mansion vibes. So it actually felt kind of right to read during this time of year. And it follows this young girl that has a horrible mother and wants to do something else. She wants to travel the world. She doesn't want to fall in love. She doesn't want to marry. And she has this boy who's been her friend forever, and he really loves her. And she really loves him, but they don't really talk about it. And some events unfold during the summer, and it was overall very sweet. And like I said, if I read this as a teenager, this would have been definitely a top favorite read of all time. But reading this as an adult, there were definitely some like cheesy, silly, roll my eyes moments, and also some parts that the dialogue was like, this is not written in that time period. It's like very modern dialogue language. I'm actually still interested in reading Edenbrook, the other book by this author. I would categorize this as like the similar reading experience as I have with contemporary romances, just like fun, light, silly, sweet, not a favorite read, not a terrible read, just a good time. Speaking of contemporary romances, I picked up Hello Stranger by Catherine Center. I loved The Bodyguard by Catherine Center earlier this year. Such a fun rom-com, one of my favorites that I read out of the handful that I have read. I've read another book by hers, the Fireman one, and that one was fine, gave it 3 stars. This one sucked. I gave it 2 stars, if that. It was like a 1.5. I hated this book. I hated the characters. I thought this was so dumb. Just did not like my time with it at all. Very unpopular opinion, I think. The main character, this girl who ends up having an accident or a seizure, something's wrong with her brain, and she can't understand faces or see faces. She doesn't recognize anyone, and she's an artist. She ends up befriending someone in her building that's helping her rediscover her art and helping her along with life as she's in this like confusing stage of like, I don't know what to do now. How am I going to be an artist if I can't paint portraits? Because that was her calling, her living. And there's just dumb family drama. There is a stupid stepsister and character that makes no sense. Love twist at the end was so obvious. I was like, are you kidding me? This is so dumb. Anyways, unpopular opinion, did not like this one at all. Definitely towards the bottom of the pile of, again, like I said, the handful of romances that I read. I have some miscellaneous ones here at the end, starting with this graphic novel, Before After, by Anne Margot Ramstein and Matthias Argue. This is a wordless graphic novel, but it's really cool because it shows the before and after. For example, like this is the coffee bean tree and a cup of coffee, or like a tree changing seasons, or like a storm at sea and then the shipwreck at the bottom of the ocean, winter log and then like fire. I don't know, there's just like juxtaposing images that affect one another, a pile of bricks and then like a brick wall. I just thought it was very clever and well done and interesting, just a cool read. I really enjoyed this one, so would recommend, and actually one that I'd probably own, work through with a child, because I feel like it'd be fun to show them like the befores and afters and how things affect one another. Another middle grade that I read, that I listened to the audiobook, which was an excellent audiobook experience. It was so well done. The beautiful production. It was very short too. It was like only 2 hours. But I also paired it along with this physical illustrated read, which was so fun. This is The Tales of Beetle the Bard. So I picked this up because I made that series video where I organized every book I've read that I can remember that are in series, and I realized that this is part of the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them and Quidditch Through Ages series. This was the 3rd book in that kind of 3-book compendium, the ones that are like additional content to the Harry Potter series. Anyways, all that to say, I never read it. I was like, hey, let's read it in series September. And this was actually the last book that I read before baby arrived, or listened to the book in the middle of the night as I was having contractions. Didn't want to wake up my husband and I was trying to distract myself. This is basically like folksy fairy tale kind of stories that are in the wizarding world. And then Albus Dumbledore breaks down each story and like the lessons learned from it. Jude Law is the one that narrates Albus Dumbledore's voice in the audiobook, and the other narrators are other actors from the movie series. So anywho's, if for whatever reason you haven't listened to the audiobook of this book and are a fan of Harry Potter, I would recommend. It was really fun. Another middle grade that I picked up in September, for series September, as a start of a series, a book that I wanted to read on my 23 books to read in 2023 list, was Nevermore, The Trials of Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend. Another unpopular opinion, I didn't hate this book, but I didn't love it. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I thought it was a fun read. I don't plan on continuing the series. I think it's a 4-book series at this point. We basically have this young girl who lives in a world and she's treated very poorly. She's treated as a cursed child and everyone kind of avoids her, doesn't talk to her. And then on the day that she's supposed to die, she gets swept up into this magical world and she doesn't really understand why she's chosen to be a part of it. And she has this mentor, father-like figure that's taking care of her, obviously friends that she makes along the way, and magical creatures. And then she ends up going through this kind of like a tri-wizard tournament. If you're going to compare it to the Harry Potter series, you have to go through these different trials to prove your magicalness, and then you're entered into the secret society if you're able to complete all of the challenges. And like I said, I thought it was fine. I thought it was sweet, but it didn't pull me in enough for me to want to continue the series. And then finally in September, I finished another series, rounded it off, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Susan Collins. This is the prequel to the Hunger Games trilogy, and the movie's coming out this year, so I kind of read it in anticipation for that. And I recently reread the whole Hunger Games trilogy with my husband, which was a lot of fun. This was also a 3-star read. I enjoyed my time with it. I'm glad I read it. Was it necessary for this story and like for the world? Kind of. You get to know Snow, which is the villain in the original trilogy. You get to know his backstory and kind of why he became the way he did, and some events unfolded. This is set in like the primitive Hunger Games. I think it was like the 10th Hunger Games, and he is a mentor to someone who's in the arena, and there is a love story and just some tragic things that happen along the way. It's pretty brutal. I listened to the audiobook and the narrator absolutely did a terrible job with the singing. There is a lot of singing and melody in this whole storyline, and none of it was sung. The audiobook narrator just read the words in a very terrible way. I really wish they didn't do that and change the audiobook production, or had someone else sing the parts if he couldn't do it. I don't know. That part was not well done. And just like the way people talked, the dialogue in this one bothered me sometimes. Like it rubbed me the wrong way. It didn't feel real. It felt kind of strange and like fevered dreamlike. The way people talk to each other didn't seem to make sense. There was like very quirky, strange characters. So yeah, 3 stars. I guess I'm glad I read it in anticipation of the movie. Maybe it added a little bit to the world and to the villainous character, but I didn't think it was well done. And I don't think that's an unpopular opinion. I see a lot of people gave it like 3 stars and didn't really love this prequel, unfortunately. So anyways, those are all the books that I read in the month of September before my life changed forever. Let me know what you thought of any of my opinions, unpopular or otherwise, and if you've read any of these books and what you thought. I will insert a clip now of Baby Boy, and I will see you guys in another video soon. Bye.